Welcome to the MPC Academy. Today we're going to be looking at the CV tools inside of the MPC Live III. Let's get to it. So this video is going to assume that you have some basic knowledge of modular gear. So I'm not going to explain patch cables, control voltage, and gates and all that stuff. Otherwise this video would be very long, but there's some basics to get out of the way. So to get started, we do have to create a new CV track. So we go new track, then we go CV, and this is where all the CV tools are going to exist to interface with modular gear. Now on the back of the MPC Live III, there is 4 ports, 4 connections to CV tools. Those ports are stereo, so if you do have a splitter like this goes 1/8 inch TRS to 2 TS outputs, so that way you can get 2 patch cables out of 1 port in the back. So the Live III does support 8 outputs of CV tools, but if you just patch in a single patch cable into one of those ports, then it'll just be considered the first number that comes out of there. So I have this first patch cable plugged into the first port, which is corresponding to CV channel 1 on the output. So on the front page of the CV tools is kind of a quick access. You can immediately route melodic information through the CV port, and this is already going through CV1. Now, if you look at the oscilloscope right here, you can see that I'm actually playing notes, and that's what's coming out of CV port number 1 on the MPC Live III. You also have immediate access to the gate, mod wheel, and velocity type of information if you want to send those out. So very quick and easy to get an instrument patched up that way. Obviously, there's much deeper tools, and we're going to get into those in a moment. There is a drum section as well. You can take all 8 CV outputs of the MPC Live III and connect those to triggers, essentially gate triggers, to be able to trigger drums from your modular gear. Now, if we hit the edit button on the CV tools page, we get access to a lot of advanced stuff. So the first page is pretty straightforward. It is the routing information. So with each output, CV1 all the way up to CV8, you can take a particular output, whether it be LFOs, envelopes, steppers, matrix multiplication and addition, etc., etc. You can route all those into one of the outputs. And then you can do output offsets and also control how much depth is actually being activated from whatever you have selected. So for instance, if it's LFO1, you can actually control how much LFO1 is getting via the depth control. And if you look over to the oscilloscope, as I increase the depth, you will see the LFO kicking in right here. By the way, if you do go into this edit page and start routing things, this will automatically bypass whatever happened on the front page. So again, the front page is just a quick and easy patch in some pitch information, gates, mod wheel type of thing. As soon as you go into the edit page and start routing things, the advanced CV tools takes over, essentially. Now, before we talk about the LFOs, let's actually go in order of what's in the bottom right here. We're going to go to the envelopes, and I'm going to change my CV1 output to envelope 1. So we can see what's going on with this stuff. I'm going to keep the depth at 100 on here, and we're going to go to the first page of the envelope. Now there is 4 envelopes that you get to work with, so a lot of variety and tools right there. You have a delay that can go all the way up to just about 5 seconds. So when you hit the note, it won't trigger until, let's say 181 milliseconds afterwards. And as you can see on the oscilloscope, it is responding accordingly. So if I tap it, there's a short delay. Let's make this delay a whole second. 1 second passes, and you have the reading kicking in right there. Let's turn the delay all the way off for now. Attack is pretty straightforward. You get a gradual rise, as you can see on the screen. Hold will hold the peak level of the attack. As you can see, it's holding on the top and then continuing on the envelope. Let's put the hold all the way down. Decay will dictate how much time it takes to go from the peak of the attack and after the hold and drop down to the sustain level. So let's say half a second on there. And let's go to the sustain. So sustain is where if you hold the note down, it'll peak and then drop down and then hold at that particular level. Let's put sustain up a bit. And then release is how much time the release happens after the note is off. So again, these do require the note to be triggered at the moment. So if we look at our screen, we have the sustain and the release. Very straightforward envelope type of stuff, especially if you've worked with modular gear in the past. You do have an explode window right here to get a little bit more hands-on access and be able to drag things across the screen like so. Now there is a few modes and sync options for these envelopes. So right now this is in note on mode. If you go looped, we turn down the attack and the decay, bring this release down as well. Now if we hold our button, you will see that it is looping right now. So it goes through the whole envelope pattern and loops, but again, does require a note to be triggered in the MIDI information for whatever clip or arrangement you're using in the MPC. And then next we have one shot. One shot will just require a single trigger. So for instance, if we put the attack up to say 1.5 seconds and then we tap it, you will see it goes up. It's also holding for 5 seconds as well. I forgot to put that on there. Now onto the sync section right here. You do have options for syncing it to your tempo, which is very convenient. Now this will adjust the entire envelope. So to illustrate this correctly, I'm going to keep it in half note mode here. And then also we're in looped mode. Now when I tap and hold, you will see how long the envelope is taking. Now, if you look at this, the attack is 200 milliseconds. That is clearly longer than 200 milliseconds on there. Now you can still adjust this accordingly. But here's the thing, let's start adjusting the sync. So if I hold down the note so we can see on the oscilloscope what's happening right there, those are clearly slower envelopes than what's being represented on the screen. If we turn this to a quarter, you can see it basically gets cut in half in the speed, and we go to an eighth, cut in half again. So the sync will actually adjust milliseconds on here, depending on what you choose. And then it can go all the way up to like 8 bars and all that if you wanted. 16th triplets, so yeah. That's what sync's going to do on there. But as you can see, if you've used envelopes before in synthesis or modular gear, this is going to be pretty straightforward for you. Let's move on to the LFOs. So before we can see the LFO information on the oscilloscope, we need to route it. So we're going to go back to routing, and we're going to change this from envelope 1 to LFO 1, like so. Now, you can see the LFO already kicking in on the screen. Let's go to the first page of LFO 1. Again, 4 LFOs. All 4 pages are the same. Let's start with the usual suspects. So we're on a sine wave right now, and as you can see, actually let's slow down the sync here. We put the sync to a half note so we can see the curve better. We are going to go ramp up first, and as you can see, it's basically a saw wave, and then ramp down is the other version of a saw wave. Triangle, straightforward, and then we have square, and then we have random 1, which as you can see is stepping, and then random 2, which might be better if we increase the sync for this. Let's go quarter notes again. You can see random 2 is sloped, essentially. So it gradually rises to whatever point it is and then starts rising or lowering to the next point. So different from random 1, which is going to be stepped, and then random 2 gives smooth gradations. Let's put this back on sine wave for now. So on the trigger menu right here, we have options for free running. We can start it on playback or start it on note on. So these are great options for syncing stuff with your production. Free running is, as you'd expect, is constantly running, and it ignores any playhead activity or notes. So if I tap a note, it's not going to re-trigger the sine wave right here. If I go to note on, you'll see it only activates when a note is on. So you can trigger the LFO depending on note information with the CV channel. If we go to playback, it's only going to work when the playhead is on. So if I hit play, and then I stop, and the LFO stops. Down here we have rate, sync, and depth. Now, rate does not do anything if sync is activated. So if you want to control it via hertz, you have to turn sync completely off, like so. And then rate will work right here. So if we go back to free running, we will see our LFO working. And then if we start adjusting the hertz, you can see we get some nice low frequency movement, and it can go all the way up to 50 hertz. And finally, depth controls how much of this LFO is actually getting put into the signal. So moving on, we have a stepper in here. Very powerful tool. We're going to set this up right now. So we go routing, and we're going to route this to the stepper, like so. So this one's probably going to be better to hear. So we're going to use both the visual aid and an oscillator from the Moog Spectravox off to my side. So you might be wondering, how do you actually get sound from a modular gear into the MPC if you wanted to route it that way? We're going to take a quick detour and do that. So I'm going to do a new track. I'm going to go audio track. And then in this audio track, we are going to monitor. Now, one thing that I already have set up is a TS cable output that is 1/8 inch. That's going out of the VCA of the Spectravox. And then on the other end is a 1/4 inch TS cable. So one cable right here, and this is going into the left combo jack on the back of the MPC Live III. Now we need to choose our input. So I'm going to go menu, then I'm going to go input, and I make sure combo jack is selected. You can increase gain right here. Now if I turn up the volume on the Spectravox, you will see I'm getting signal, but we're not hearing it yet. So how do we do that? We go to our audio track, and we're going to hit input on the monitor. And then I'm going to choose input number 1. And now you can hear the oscillator coming out. So what this allows you to do is take any CV pattern that you make with the CV tools and track it directly into an audio track on the MPC, whether it be arrangement or in a clip. So back on the edit page, we have the stepper. And it comes predefined with the 16 steps in the arrangement and the values that it currently has. You cannot go above 16 steps. It is always a max of 16 down to only 1 step. So there's a little bit of a limit right there. So I'm taking CV1 output into the oscilloscope, and then out of the oscilloscope, I'm bringing it into the 1 volt octave of the VCO that is in the Spectravox. Now, in order to trigger the stepper, you do have to hold a note, as you can see on the oscilloscope. So let's hear the Spectravox. That is the VCO. And now put on the stepper. As you can hear. Now, instead of holding a note every time to trigger this, I'm actually going to record a note into a clip just so I can trigger it with the play start. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to hit record, play start. Okay, so we have our note. So now every time I hit play, the stepper will start. Okay, so if I turn up the Spectravox, we can go into the edit page, go into the routing, and then we can start adjusting the depth. Now what's nice is you could take the Q links and route those to any of these depths to have more expression during performances. Let's get back to the stepper though. Let's actually turn this all the way down to say 5 steps. So it's only going to go the first 4 and the 5th one right there. And we can actually hear this by doing this and playing it. You're also hearing the note retrigger as well after the 2 bars. There is ties below each one of these steps, so you can have these either be hard steps like so, which if you look at the oscilloscope, you'll see those steps like that. Also, you know, we're going to change the speed sync to 8th note so you can see that a little bit better, and increase the depth again so we can see the steps clearer. As you can see, clear stepping. Now, if I start increasing some of these smoothing ties, you'll see there's slopes that start kicking in. But what's nice is the stepper gives you the ability to make some complex shapes for some modulations that can directly sync with the playhead of the MPC. Now, the speed sync is as you'd expect, but you can turn it off like so on none, and then it should correspond to whatever the speed is. So if we turn the speed, say, way down, and then hit a note, yeah, you can see it's much slower on the oscilloscope, but if we turn it up, yeah, now let's hear this. All the way up to 50 hertz. And if you're wondering how do you actually get musical information out of these steps, ideally in your modular setup you would have a quantizer. So you can send this raw CV information into the quantizer, and then the quantizer can sort it out into whatever scale you want for your track. So a little pro tip right there. That's a stepper. Let's move on to the utilities page. We have 2 ramps, so they can go from 50 milliseconds all the way up to 10 seconds of time if you want. And the shape has some nice flexibility as well. And again, you get 2 of these ramps. The clock divider will connect directly to the playhead and whatever tempo you have going on. So if we go over to the routing and go all the way down to the clock divider, and then if we hit play, you will see it is dividing on a 1-to-1. So back to the utilities here. If we go, say, 1 out of 4, then it's going to be, I think, is that 16th or 30 seconds? It's going off of quarter notes, so it's dividing the quarter note by 4. So maybe it's 64th notes. Also, you can adjust the bass as well. So you could put this all the way up to, say, 4. At 4 over 1, I believe it's triggering a half note for playback on there. Let's put this back to 1-to-1, and then let's look at the percent here. So the percent allows you to control how much the gate signal is on versus off. If we look at turning the percent all the way up to 75%, you'll see that we're getting skinny towers on the oscilloscope. If we turn this all the way down to 25, you'll see we're getting thick towers. If we put this back up to 50, then it's even towers essentially. There's also step 1 and step 2. I'm going to put step 1 on here. Go back to the utilities here. Now, if we turn up the time to say half a second, you'll see every time you hit a note, it will create a step with that much time. So if we turn this down 58 milliseconds, it creates a little blip whenever it receives a note trigger. And this can go all the way up to 10 seconds. It does respond to the note off as well. So if it is 10 seconds, but it receives a note off, it kills the step regardless. You also have 8 offsets, and these are utilities to multiply into the matrix. You can patch these directly if you wanted. Let's go offset number 1. Now, as you can see, it is a hard value that's essentially being put into the signal. So this offset allows you to adjust things up or down in voltage, depending on the goal that you're looking for your sound design. So now that you have all those tools in your bag, you can now do some really interesting stuff inside the matrix. So you have 4 summing spots and 4 multiplying spots, and they can mix and match as well. So for instance, let's multiply LFO1 with LFO2. And let's go back to the routing real quick. Let's go LFO1, just so we can see this in action. LFO1, we're going to slow down. So that's what it looks like. And then LFO2, we're going to stick with the syncing being 1/8 notes. So just to visualize that, let's have a look. That's what LFO2 looks like. Okay. Now, if we go to the matrix 1 multiply, this can throw you off pretty easily if you're not paying attention. The little star versus the plus, I've mixed those up many times, even though I know exactly what they are. But when I've gone through this stuff, I've accidentally selected one versus the other, and I've been like, what's going on here? But just remember, you got to pay attention to that little detail. So I'm going to go to the multiply matrix 1, and you'll see that we have a more interesting LFO shape that's going on now just from multiplying these two. And we can start adjusting them as well. Maybe increase the depth of the second one. And also, let's make it random sloped. So, what does that sound like? Let's have a listen. Not exactly useful for pitch information, right? So let's actually change this to the spectral shift. So spectral shift is basically the filter in here. Or we can go to the pulse width modulation, which sounds great as well. So with relatively little effort, we basically made a nice complex modulation that can actually sync directly into the timeline of the MPC with your modular gear. Now I'm going to take a second patch cable and patch in the stepper into the pitch information of the VCO. So we're going to take CV output 2 and put that into the VCO. But I'm going to use the addition matrix number 1 for this instead. So we're going to go here. We're going to go stepper. Now when I play, nothing's happening because I have not turned up the depth yet. So if I turn up the depth. Now we're getting a little crazy sound here. We're going to sync this to 1/8 notes. Got a nice crazy little bass line going now. Let's actually throw a kick in here. Got a little drum beat now. So I put the stepper into the sum on the matrix page. Let's add something to that stepper. For instance, we could go to envelope number 1, drop the depth so it's not too aggressive. Let's see how that sounds. Let's turn the depth all the way down. And then start increasing the depth. Yeah, I'm making a bit of a sonic mess here, but that's the point, right? As you can see, the matrix page is really where this all opens up because you can take everything from the offsets to the clock dividers to LFOs, ramps, etc., and provide useful tools for your modular gear without having to use a bunch of separate modules in your modular setup that could take up a lot of valuable space. Now you have a ton of tools from LFOs, envelopes, ramps, steppers, etc., etc. The only thing that you're not going to be able to do with this is be able to send information out of modular gear into this matrix to trigger things and then send it back out. But that's the matrix, and that is the CV tools for the MPC Live III.